Good morning. I'm Olivia Holas for Boca Magazine, and it's a beautiful Thursday here in Boca Raton. We are joined by recurring guest Marius Ged, Managing Partner of Ged Lawyers, and J. Albert Johnson, Senior Trial Counselor for Ged Lawyers, with a super impressive list of high-profile cases, as we always say. So it's always great to see you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Olivia. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Olivia.
It's always great seeing you. So during our last Facebook Live chat, we talked about the tragic occurrence, in Surfside with the condominium collapse. So today we're following up. This is kind of a continuous discussion because the city of Boca Raton is implementing a new ordinance. It's Ordinance 5589, Building Recertification Program. Al, can you please explain what this ordinance addresses?
Well, of course, to begin with, this is a very difficult subject to speak about. Several months ago, 252 people who lived in a condominium were severely affected by the collapse of the condominium. 100 of those innocent people living there died. And so it's a very, very difficult subject matter to talk about. Often we are a reactive society. And so it turns out that apparently now we are just that, reacting to the terrible happening at Surfside, where 100 people lost their lives. Significantly, after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, there was a number of laws passed, both municipal laws and state laws, governing the construction of buildings with regard to wind damage. But none of those laws, none of those ordinances went in deeply into the construction of buildings from the bottom up. There are a lot of theories going on around of what would cause the Surfside collapse. Some of them because of what is alleged to have been poor workmanship when it was constructed. Some of them because of the spalling of the concrete in the building, which was noticed prior to the collapse of the building, which caused rust in the so-called rebar, the metal intrusions into the concrete, which hold the building up. And I think probably the most serious discovery was the fact that the building had been inspected a year before the collapse, that there were significant problems developed by structural engineers, and nothing was done. That's a really serious matter. So it became evident that new laws were necessary. And here in Boca Raton, we think that we have a very enlightened city council and certainly a very forward-looking, enlightened lawyer, mayor, Scott Singer. Scott immediately, after the happening of Surfside, decided that we here in Boca Raton needed a codification of the existing building code so as to provide for inspections of our many condominiums. And with his leadership, the city council passed on August 24th a series of new laws governing the inspection of buildings. And what it requires is the following. Every building which is greater than 30 years old or is 3 stories in height or 50 feet in height, and or is built to accommodate 500 visitors, be they occupants or be they seasonal visitors, is subject to the ordinance. What it says is the city is going to give the condominium owners, that is the condominium building structure board of directors, 1 year commencing forthwith, by the way, 1 year to have a complete inspection done of the premises. And that means a structural engineer and an electrical engineer with a very, very detailed plan on the condition of the building from the date that it was constructed to the present time. It also calls for the inspection of all buildings 30 years or older, 30 years or older, but does not include single family residence and does not include duplex apartments. That detailed plan must be submitted to the city of Boca Raton within 365 days or 1 year from the notification. The planning of that notification requirement begins in 4 phases. The first one is on the barrier island. That is the land, the buildings, the condominiums, which are east of the Intracoastal Waterway. The second one is between the Intracoastal Waterway and Route 95. And the third one is 95 west, or west of 95. So it's going to take 4 years to receive the plans from all of the buildings. Now, one thing should be made clear, and that is it is the responsibility of the board of directors, that is of each condominium. That board of directors, as we lawyers know, has a fiduciary duty to make sure that the condominium is in proper condition for occupancy. In this particular case, it not only imposes that duty on the board of directors to make sure the property is fit for occupancy, but it imposes upon those members of the board of directors to see to it that the new law is complied with, and to see to it that that plan, which is very, very detailed in requirement, very detailed, as to structural condition of the property and as to electrical condition of the property, is complied with. I don't think anyone who's ever lived in a condominium, and I've lived in a number of them, has not noticed what's called spalling. Spalling are the circular breaks in the concrete, generally found first or noticed first in the garages. Mm-hmm. And that was what the focus was in the Surfside condominium. The spalling, or the circular breaks in the concrete in Surfside, was noticed by many of the condominium owners, who brought it to the attention of the board of directors. And on information and belief, did very little to correct that. Although they had engaged a structural engineer, the structural engineer on information and belief had told them, hey, we've got some serious problems here that need to be rectified. I'm not casting any blame on anybody at this time, but it's something which is very important, because every single person who lives in a condominium or a building 30 feet in height, or is older than 30 years, which is many, many, many of them in Boca Raton and elsewhere, ought to be aware of the fact that when they notice some kind of deterioration in the building, like the spalling, which I described, which is present in almost every condominium to some extent, has to bring it to the attention of management. You got to do it. It's your duty to do it. It's your life-saving duty to do it. And the board of directors must, commensurate with each one of their fiduciary duties, do something about it. What do? You call in structural engineers, you call in electrical engineers, and they do a study, and they determine what has to be done. Now, in all fairness, in Surfside, there was an assessment made to correct structural defects. And in some cases, that assessment was hundreds of thousands of dollars levied against condominium owners. An onerous figure, and one which many people could not afford, obviously. And on information and belief, many did not and could not. The board of directors under those circumstances would be required to provide funding programs necessary so that the occupants could meet the requirements of providing structural repairs. If that had been done during the year prior to the happening of the event, many people's lives may have been saved.
Yeah, Alan and Marty, that's what I keep thinking about is, this could have been prevented, and this is what the ordinance is hopefully going to be able to do, is that this type of tragedy does not happen again. But these inspections are costly. And, what if a property owner and a condominium, what if they don't have the resources to spend on those, engineering documents and all the other inspections that go along with this ordinance requirement? I mean, what type of options do they have in order to avoid something like Surfside?
Well, as I mentioned before, there are many ways in which a condominium owner can secure the funding, and that is by borrowing money. Mm-hmm. And it would be incumbent upon the board of directors of the condominium to provide funding resources so that people could pay for those assessments over a period of years. Just because you move into a condominium, you don't give up all your rights and obligations. You may give up some things with regard to the maintenance of the property and entrust it to the board of directors or management, but you certainly don't give up your obligation to take care of yourself and your family. And that duty that you owe to yourself, your family, and other condominium owners doesn't stop with just living there.
Right.
Those duties to provide a safe place for your own family and for others continues. So with regard to Surfside, on information and belief from what you read in the newspapers at least, those individuals were provided with certain financing options which would allow them to pay the assessments. If that had been done within the year's time, yeah, maybe there could have been structural repairs which would have prevented the collapse. I don't know. It seems to me that it was a 12-story building. It seems to me that to collapse like it did into the garage, it would have been a really difficult and momentous job to shore it up at that point so it wouldn't fall into the garage. I don't know. I'm not an engineer.
I also think, sometimes, when, being part of the HOA and the board, it's, you volunteer yourself. You volunteer to be on that. So I almost feel like, I don't know, I could be wrong. And Al, I know you've been on you've been the chairman of the board. You've been very involved with several condominium buildings that you've lived in. Do you think that people are going to be deterred to join and be a part of these boards? Because it's an important role. I mean, this is not something that you just come and show up and then leave. I mean, you have a fiduciary responsibility. Do you think this is going to scare a lot of people from volunteering their time to be on these boards?
They're already scared. The usual condominium owner who you approach and ask them if they'd like to serve on the board, or the HOA property owner, you ask me if they'd like to serve on the board of directors, they say, no, not me. And the reason is because oftentimes people on those boards don't conduct themselves properly, and they end up by contentious board meetings. I've been the subject of, or the object of, a vilification by many, as I was the president of the HOA where I presently live. I was the president of a 400-unit condominium here in Boca Raton, and I was the president of the Boca Raton Highland Beach Condominium Association, where we had 61 condominiums, over 10,000 people. It's not easy. You're dealing with people with different attitudes and different backgrounds in life who settle into condominiums and settle into HOAs. So in order to keep those meetings in a real fruitful way, by really asking people to be expressive, but also realize that people are going to have different ideas is a difficult proposition. I certainly would say that I think that every condominium owner who is otherwise qualified by experience or background certainly should volunteer their time to serve on condominium boards, or certainly to serve on condominium committees. Committees are established by the condominium board in many, many ways, which people can participate. To do otherwise might lead to what happened at Surfside. The lack of attention to the building that they live in causes a serious, serious problem with regard to maintenance of the building. Everybody thinks it's somebody else's obligation.
Yeah.
And Olivia, just to add what Al mentioned, it's a very difficult job, obviously, because you're policing or in control of or have a fiduciary duty to your neighbors. And everyone has a different opinion, like Al said, and everyone wants things their way or a different way. So you're imposing laws and regulations on your neighbors. And sometimes those laws and rules affect your neighbors in different ways. And it tarnishes relationships. We've all know the term of the condo commandos, and just the people that are very aggressive the way they handle these issues. And that's not good for everyone in the community. But more importantly, I've been asked, and I know Al has done this before, when you go to a board, everyone thinks it's prestigious, but you need to look or ask that board is, do they provide directors and officers insurance to cover you? That's something that would provide the board protection. And, here with this horrible tragedy of the towers in Miami, there's not enough insurance. And, the board will, I'm sure their insurance policy will tender their policy as soon as they can. But this is an extreme accident or extreme event where, unfortunately, hundreds of people were injured and hundreds of people have died. But that's not the normal case. But the boards do receive lawsuits from the homeowners. And that's a really awkward situation because it's your neighbors suing you for some enforcement, some rule, to change some rule. And you want to make sure that you're covered for liability. The mechanism to do that or to protect you would be called directors and officers insurance. And I know because we do a lot of work with boards, specifically representing them in property damage, a lot of the boards don't have that insurance. And a lot of the board members are affluential people that have no idea that they're potentially exposed to liability for volunteering to try to help someone. So just be careful how you enter those relationships and look at those certain rules and ask those certain questions to make sure you're protected.
Yeah, and Marty, you just kind of partly answered my next question. How does your law firm, help condominium boards and property owners? I mean, how can you help in this type of situation?
So we're often retained by condominium boards or HOA associations as a result of hurricane damage or property damage. And in those instances, it's really hard actually to get the buy-in of the board because you have so many different people, so many different personal backgrounds, so many different personal experiences, and everyone, again, thinks they can do it better, different, or cheaper. So it's a difficult situation navigating through those boards. But in the cases that we represent, the condominium associations, it's usually a long process. Nothing is done swiftly. It's very bureaucratic. There has to be a quorum. There needs to be rules that are followed for the meeting procedures to align. And unfortunately, at least here in Florida, a lot of those board members don't even live here. They may be in the North, they may be in the Midwest or somewhere else. So gathering those people to make a decision is very difficult. And I can remember specifically handling a significant condominium board we represented in Panama City as a result of Hurricane Michael. they had windows blown out and half of their roof was ripped off. And they couldn't get a quorum of the board members to sign a contract to move forward. Took them weeks. The property manager and all of them wanted to do it because of the formalities required. They couldn't even act. So they were actually being harmed more by the inefficiency of the operation of the board. Things have changed now a little bit with DocuSign and Zoom, and people are taking advantage of this technology, but there was not one Zoom meeting during Michael. People had to physically get on conference lines, and FedEx packages were sent out, and it was just a totally different scenario than we're in now.
Yeah, yeah. And, Al, do you think, so this new ordinance is in the city of Boca Raton, but do you see this type of ordinance being adopted in other parts of our area, in other cities?
I think, if my information is correct, the city of Boca Raton is the first municipality in the state of Florida.
Wow.
To enact legislation such as has been done by the city of Boca Raton under the leadership of Mayor Scott Singer. So it's a really significant thing that this has been done here in Boca with the leadership that's been shown by our city council and our mayor. I would hope that this kind of legislation will be adopted in every city and town throughout the state of Florida. I think it's very, very important.
And Al, don't you believe that the Florida Senate, when they go, or the Florida legislature, when they go back to Senate this January, or to session, excuse me, are going to address this? I mean, historically, Florida has been a leader in the building code. There's a state building code, Olivia, which governs all municipalities and really sits on top of the local laws as a superior law. It's called the Florida Building Code. And as Al had mentioned, after Hurricane Andrew, the state of Florida was pioneers in developing certain codes. And to this day, it's called the Miami-Dade Wind-Approved Code. I mean, those rules about how certain structures need to be designed and withhold certain wind rates is prevalent throughout the state and now throughout the country. And I strongly believe that when the Florida legislature goes back in January, you're going to see a lot of bills, and you're going to see exactly what our pretty advanced mayor of Boca Raton has done. You're going to see them adopt something similar or even stronger to that and make that statewide law. That's my belief.
Well, it sounds like we have something to be very proud of, being Boca Raton residents. So, we're definitely at the forefront of this issue and being proactive. So something to be proud of.
Yeah.
The problem is, Olivia, after Hurricane Andrew, because there was state legislation adopted with the Florida Building Code, it didn't go far enough. It did certain things with regard to building and wind mitigation, but it certainly didn't go as far as this building code that we now have in effect in Boca Raton by requiring a very, very exhaustive study be made by building engineers, by structural engineers and electrical engineers. It's got to be very, very intensive. And I hope the legislature does what Marty has suggested by enacting a very comprehensive new building inspection code.
Well, we'll certainly be keeping our eye out for this. And I know that you are on the pulse of it all. So we're lucky to have you. My final question, as you know, is always the fun question. So are you ready for this? What's your favorite architectural style, since we're talking about properties? Marty.
I like cottages. I really enjoy different, like the Cape Cod look.
Yes.
I spend time in the Northeast in the summer, and I really appreciate that type of architecture. Florida has some really unique architecture, but it changes every 10 years. When I first moved down here, everything was Mediterranean. That was in early 2000s, and now everything's modern. So we get a lot of progressive changes here. I kind of like the old school, just traditional, those cottage looks.
Yeah, super cozy. And what about you, Al?
Well, having lived on Cape Cod for 35 years, I certainly feel that that is something which I know and love. However, here in Camino Gardens, where I live, we've adopted a Bahamas type concept for our homes, which I think is really, really nice. And the single family, single floor, Bahamas type concept, I think works very, very well.
Very nice. Well, great, two great styles. It's always so nice to chat with you, and these fun questions, I love them because it gets us to know you better. So it's, you know, kind of nice. We talk about such serious things and, you know, something to just lighten the mood. So thank you so much for your time. As always, the two of you, you are textbooks of knowledge, and we are so lucky to have you share, you know, all of your knowledge with us. I mean, we really are very, very lucky to have you be so open with us, and we appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in. We always appreciate you as well. So have a wonderful Thursday and a great weekend. Until next time, stay well. Bye.